Prologue, the return. The scent of blood and rain is thick in the air, a metallic perfume that makes my wolf stir with grim satisfaction. I stand at the edge of the clearing, the hood of my dark cloak shadowing my face, watching the chaos I've unleashed. Preston's wedding canopy is in tatters. His perfect, white-suited form is frozen. His eyes, those once-beloved amber eyes, wide with a horror so profound it feels like a victory. He's staring at the small, bundled form in my arms, at the tiny, sleeping face peeking from the furs, crowned with a shock of unmistakable dark hair. His hair. My sister, Fiona, in her ruined lace gown, lets out a sound like a wounded animal. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispers, her voice carrying across the silent, stunned. I let my hood fall back. Let them all see the scars, the cold light in my eyes that replaced the warmth they extinguished. Preston takes a step forward, his hand outstretched, his alpha authority crumbling into pure, desperate confusion. "Sophia," his voice breaks. I meet his gaze, holding his air closer. My smile is a blade. "Hello, husband." The word is poison on my tongue. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with blood. It started with a whisper and the crushing weight of his hand on mine under the full moon. Chapter 1. Preston's grip on my wrist was going to leave a bruise. We stood in the shadow of the great oak, the heart of the Silverfang territory, the chill of the autumn night seeping through my thin sweater. The pack feast roared behind us, a discordant symphony of laughter, clinking glasses, and howls that grated against my suddenly raw nerves. He'd pulled me away from the firelight, his expression a mask of strained calm that didn't reach his eyes. "You need to be careful, Sophia," he said, his voice low, meant only for my ears. His thumb stroked the frantic pulse point in my wrist, a gesture that might have been tender if not for the iron clamp of his fingers. "Careful of what?" I tried to keep my own voice light, pulling back slightly. He didn't let go. "Enjoying the harvest moon, Francis told a funny story. I was laughing. You were laughing with Jack." He said the name like it was a curse. His gaze flickered over my shoulder, back toward the fire where Jack, the pack's head sentinel, was indeed regaling a group with some exaggerated hunting tale. "He looks at you. Everyone looks at everyone. It's a pack gathering." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. This wasn't new, Preston's possessiveness, but tonight it felt different. Sharper. The air between us crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the mate bond humming warmly in my chest. That bond felt like a tether, a promise. His grip felt like a shackle. "He looks at you like he's measuring you, like he's waiting." Preston finally released my wrist, only to cradle my face in his hands, forcing my eyes to his. In the dappled moonlight, his alpha aura pressed down on me, a weight I usually found comforting. Tonight it felt suffocating. "You are my mate, my chosen. That comes with a spotlight, and with enemies, you cannot be so open, so trusting." "I am Sophia," I wanted to say. Being open and trusting is what I am. It's what you said you loved when you found me, a lone wolf with no pack, and brought me into the warmth of Silverfang. But the words stuck in my throat under the intensity of his gaze. "I'm not a porcelain doll, Preston. I won't break from a conversation. It's not your breaking I'm worried about." He dropped his hands, turning to look out into the dark forest. His broad shoulders were rigid. "There are challenges, rumblings. Some in the pack think an alpha's mate should be stronger, from an established bloodline." The words landed like physical blows. I wrapped my arms around myself. "My bloodline is you. You chose me. The moon blessed it." Our mating ceremony under the last full moon had been the happiest night of my life. The memory of it now felt thin, fragile. The moon's blessing isn't always enough for wolves with ambition in their hearts and tradition on their tongues. He sighed, the sound weary. "Just stay close to Fiona tonight. Let people see you with my family. It helps." Fiona, his younger sister. My friend. The thought of using her, of performing some kind of acceptance play, made my skin crawl. But I nodded, because arguing with Preston when he was in this mood was like trying to divert a river with your bare hands. Okay, he leaned in, brushing his lips against my forehead. The mate bond surged, a warm, golden thread of connection that momentarily drowned out the unease. For our future, our future, the secret I carried, still so new I could barely believe it myself, trembled on my lips. The mist cycles, the new, wild scent that had woven itself into my own, the tiny, fierce spark of life I'd felt just this morning. I opened my mouth to tell him, to replace this tension with joy. Preston, Alpha, they're calling for the toast. Fiona's bright, clear voice cut through the trees. She appeared, a vision in a soft blue dress, her smile luminous. She linked her arm through mine, deftly pulling me from Preston's shadow. I've been looking for you, Sophia. Come on, you can't miss the toast. Preston gave a curt nod, his alpha mask sliding back into place. Go, I'll be right there. Fiona chattered as she led me back to the roaring fire, her words a swift stream about the music, the food, how handsome her brother looked in his ceremonial leathers. I barely heard her. My mind was a whirlwind, our future. I placed a hand low on my abdomen, hidden by the folds of my sweater. The toast was a booming, rowdy affair. Preston stood on the raised dais, a goblet of honeyed mead in his hand, every inch the powerful, confident Alpha. His eyes found mine in the crowd. He smiled, and for a second it was the old smile, the one that had made me feel like I'd come home. He raised his cup. To the pack. The pack howled in response. I lifted my own cup, letting the sweet smell of the mead wash over me. I didn't drink. I couldn't. Later, as the feast began to wind down, a deep, resonant voice spoke at my elbow. The mead not to your liking, Sophia. Jack. He stood a respectful distance away, his arms crossed over his chest. He was older than Preston, his face etched with the scars of a lifetime of guarding borders. His eyes, a steady, watchful gray, held no mockery, only genuine curiosity. It's a bit sweet for me tonight, I said. Wise, he said, his gaze drifting to where Preston was now in deep conversation with a circle of older pack elders. Their expressions were serious. Sometimes the sweetest things can leave There was no threat in his tone. It was an observation, flat and simple. Before I could respond, Francis, the pack's jovial historian, bustled over, clapping Jack on the back. Planning to steal our Lunar away for a philosophical debate, Jack. Not allowed. She promised me the next day. Jack simply inclined his head and melted back into the crowd. Francis whisked me into a clumsy, spinning dance that made me laugh despite the heavy thoughts. As we twirled, I saw Preston watching us. He wasn't smiling. The music faded. A hush fell, not the comfortable quiet of a night ending, but a thick, expectant silence. Preston stepped back onto the dais. The firelight carved his features into something stark. My pack, he began, his voice carrying the weight of command. Tonight, under the harvest moon, we celebrate our bonds. We look to the future. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. They passed over me, lingered for a heartbeat, and moved on. My breath hitched. An alpha's strength is the pack's strength, but an alpha's legacy, that is the pack's future. It must be built on unshakable foundations, on pure blood. A cold finger traced its way down my spine. The secret in my belly seemed to shrink to hide. Preston's jaw tightened. He looked not at me, but at a point just to my left, where Fiona stood, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I have made a decision, Preston announced, the words falling like stones into the silent night. For the good of the Silverfang Pack, for the security of our future, the mating bond with Sophia is hereby dissolved. The world did not so much shatter as simply cease to exist. Sound, light, feeling, it all drained away into a roaring, white vacuum. I felt my knees buckle, but I didn't fall. I was frozen, a statue of disbelief. Murmurs rippled through the pack, shocked, confused. Preston's voice continued, steady and merciless. The moon's blessing, while given, can be reconsidered by an alpha when the safety of the pack is at stake. Sophia's unknown origins pose a risk. He was talking about me as if I were a flawed weapon, a weak link in a fence. I saw Jack, his expression granite. I saw Francis, his mouth agape in horror. Then Preston stepped down from the dais. He walked, not toward me but to Fiona. He took her trembling hands in his. My sister, Fiona, of the pure Silverfang bloodline, has agreed to strengthen our pack from within. She has agreed to be my true mate and the mother of the heirs who will lead us. Fiona's eyes, wide and swimming with tears, flickered to me. There was no triumph in them, only a desperate, pleading shame. She had known. The mate bond in my chest didn't break. It was ripped out. A searing, white-hot agony that tore through every nerve ending, leaving a howling, empty void where his love, his warmth, his presence had lived just moments before. I gasped, doubling over, my hand flying to the painful, sudden hollow beneath my wrist. Preston finally looked at me. His amber eyes were cold, distant, the eyes of a stranger pronouncing a sentence. "Sophia, you are cast out. You have until dawn to leave Silverfang territory. If you are found within our borders after that, you will be considered a rogue and treated as such." The finality of it. The brutal public execution of my life, my love, my future. The future that was, right now, a tiny, fragile spark inside me. He turned his back. The pack, after a moment of stunned hesitation, began to do the same. One by one. Faces I'd laughed with, fought beside, broke bread with, averted their eyes. The circle closed, with Preston and Fiona. My alpha and my sister, at its center, and me on the outside, alone in the cold of the night finally penetrated the numbness. It started in my bones and spread outwards, colder than any winter. I straightened up, my arms wrapping around the emptiness where our bond had been, around the secret that was now a curse. I looked at Preston's unforgiving back. I looked at Fiona's bowed head. And I ran, not in tears, but in a silent, shattering shock. Into the dark, unforgiving woods, the echoes of the pack's slowly resuming life chasing me like ghosts. The cliffhanger of my existence had just crumbled away, and I was falling, with only the silent, growing life in my womb as a witness to the fall. Chapter 2. The echo of my son's cry still hung in the clearing's air, a raw, living counterpoint to the stunned silence I had wrought. I watched the truth carve its way through Preston's arrogance, leaving only a hollowed-out shock in its wake. His heir, his true heir, born of the mate bond he had so carelessly shredded. I didn't look at Fiona. I didn't need to. The scent of her devastation, sharp as broken glass and just as cutting, was perfume to me. It was Preston who moved first, a single, jerking step forward, his hand outstretched not toward me, but toward the child in my arms. "That's not possible. The moon bears witness to what is possible, Alpha," I said, my voice carrying without effort, cold and clear. "You rejected the bond, but you cannot reject the blood. His name is Kieran." A low murmur rippled through the pack, a tide of confusion and dawning realization. They had cast me out, but here I stood, holding their future in my arms. The political purity Preston had sold them was a lie. The strongest heir often came from the strongest, most fated bond, not the most convenient bloodline. And our bond, for all his betrayal, had been legendary in its power. Jack, the head sentinel, stood rigid at the periphery of the wedding party. His eyes, always so watchful, were fixed on me, but his expression was unreadable. He did not draw a weapon. He did not move to intercept me. He simply observed. "You dare!" Preston finally found his voice, a growl building in his chest. You dare bring this spectacle here on this day to poison what is sacred? You poisoned it long before I arrived, I said, shifting Kieran slightly. He had quieted, his bright eyes, so like his father's in shape but so different in spirit, taking in the strange faces. I am merely revealing the toxin. Fiona found her voice then, a broken whisper. Sophia, your son, he's beautiful. The sound of my old name on her lips was a violation. Do not speak to me, I said, my gaze slicing to her. The white gown she wore was a mockery. You lost the right to my name when you took my place in his bed. She flinched as if struck. Preston stepped partially in front of her, a possessive, protective gesture that once would have shattered me. Now it was just a tactical detail. You are banished, he snarled. Your presence is a violation of my decree. A few of the younger guards stirred, but their eyes flicked nervously between their alpha, Jack's immobile form, and the baby in my arms. They were wolves, instinctual above all else, and the instinct to protect a pup, especially an alpha's pup, was warring violently with their alphas. You can try to remove me, I said, letting a hint of the power I now carried seep into my tone. It wasn't the submissive Omega energy they remembered. It was something else, something forged in isolation and fury. But the child stays with me. Where I go, he goes. The challenge hung in the air. I saw the calculation in Preston's eyes. Publicly attacking me now, with the pack's loyalty wavering on a knife's edge, would be disastrous. He was trapped by his own narrative. Why have you come here? He demanded, shifting to a tone of weary, betrayed authority. To torment us, to seek revenge. Revenge? I almost laughed. This isn't revenge, Preston. This is a reckoning. I came to give you a choice. A public choice before the pack you claim to lead so purely. I owe you nothing. You owe him everything, I countered, nodding down at Kieran. You can acknowledge him, here and now. Declare him your heir, your firstborn son. Grant him his birthright, and grant me the protection and status as his mother that should have been mine all along. The clearing erupted into gasps and muttered exclamations. What I was asking was unprecedented. A rejected mate, reinstated through her child. It would undermine his mating with Fiona completely, make a mockery of his pure bloodline decree. And if I refuse, then I walk away, I said, shrugging as if it meant nothing. I take your heir into the wilds beyond any pack's borders. He will bear my name, not yours. He will learn my ways. And one day, when he is grown and strong, and the story of the Alpha who cast out his own blood is a legend in every territory, he may return. And he will not come for a title. The silence this time was absolute, frozen. I had not raised my voice. I had simply laid out the future like a map. Preston's face paled beneath his tan. He saw it too. He saw the warrior Kieran would become, fueled by the righteous fury of a discarded mother. He saw his own legacy turning to ash. You would use a child as a weapon, Fiona whispered, horrified. I am a weapon, I corrected her, my eyes still locked on Preston. Forged by your betrayal, he is simply my truth. I saw the conflict raging in him. Pride, fear, political survival, a twisted strand of possessiveness, it all warred behind his eyes. The pack waited, breath held. This was the moment that would his jaw tightened. The law is clear. A severed bond is severed. The child of a rejected mate has no claim unless formally adopted by the Alpha and his recognized mate. His hand found Fiona's, clutching it. My mate is Fiona. Our children will be our heirs. That child is a bastard born of a dead bond. He holds no claim here. There it was, the final public renunciation. A colder, deeper cut than the first. He had looked at his own son and called him a bastard. Something inside me, some last, fragile hope I hadn't even known I was clinging to, shriveled and died. It was a clean death, a merciful one. I nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict. So be it. I adjusted the sling, holding Kieran close to my chest, turning my back on the Alpha, on the wedding, on my past. The pack parted before me, a sea of stunned and shameful faces. I met no one's eyes until I reached the tree line. Francis, the historian, stood there, his jovial face now etched with profound sorrow. He gave me the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't support, it was an acknowledgement of history being recorded, of tragedy being witnessed. I walked in. I didn't go far, just deep enough for the shadows to swallow me, for the scent of wedding flowers and pack fear to fade. I found a small, rocky overhang near a trickling stream. It was not a home. It was a tactical position. Kieran began to fuss, hungry and unsettled by the tension. As I fed him, the adrenaline seeped away, leaving a terrifying, crystalline clarity. Preston had chosen. He had chosen his pride, his political union, over his own blood. He had made me, definitively, an enemy. And an enemy does. The moon was high when I felt the presence. A single wolf, approaching with deliberate, unhurried steps. Not stealthy, but not announcing itself either. I didn't move from where I sat, my back against cool stone, Kieran sleeping soundly against my heart. Jack stepped into the small clearing before my overhang. He was in human form, dressed in simple sentinel leathers. He held his hands slightly away from his body. "You shouldn't be here, head sentinel," I said quietly. "Consorting with the banished is probably a treasonous offense." "Probably," he agreed, his voice a low rumble. He didn't come closer. "That was a dangerous game you played today." "It wasn't a game." "No," he conceded. "It was a declaration of war. He won't let you leave the territory, Sophia. Not now, not after that. You know too much, and you carry too potent a symbol." "My name is Sophia," I said, "and I am not leaving." His eyes narrowed, finally showing a flicker of emotion, surprise. "The border sentinels have orders to detain you on sight. He's spinning a tale that you've been driven mad by rejection, that the child might not even be his, that you're a danger to yourself and the pack. He's laying the groundwork to take the pup by force and silence you forever." A cold spike drove through my gut, but I had expected nothing less. "Then it's a good thing I'm not heading for the border. What are you planning?" I looked at him, this man who had once warned me of a bitter aftertaste. He had watched, but he had not acted. "Why do you care, Jack? You stood by with the rest of them." He didn't flinch from the accusation. "I follow my Alpha's orders, but I also serve the pack. The pack is not the Alpha. The pack is the people, the future." His gaze flicked to the sleeping bundle in my arms. "That is the future. A future Preston is willing to destroy to save face. That does not serve the pack." It was as close to dissent as I would ever hear from him. "What do you want?" "To know your intention. If you stay, you will be hunted. You cannot fight the entire pack Sentinel Corps, not with a newborn." A faint smile touched my lips. "Who said anything about fighting the Sentinels?" He stared at me, perplexed. I said nothing more. Let him wonder. Let them all wonder. After a long moment, he sighed. "There are caves to the north beyond the Black Ridge. Old, forgotten places. Not on any patrol route. The hunting is poor, so no one goes there." He took a single step backward. "A wolf could disappear there. For a time. He was giving me a hiding place, a respite. It was more than I'd gotten from anyone else in this cursed pack." "Why?" "Because the aftertaste," he said, meeting my eyes squarely, "is more bitter than I ever imagined. And someone needs to ensure the truth doesn't die in the woods." He melted back into the forest then, silent as a ghost. I sat in the dark, Jack's words and the offered sanctuary turning over in my mind. It was a kindness, but kindness was a weakness I could no longer afford. I would not run to a hole to hide. My vengeance was not a skulking thing. Preston thought the threat was that I would leave and raise a rival. He was wrong. The real threat was that I would stay. As the first gray light of dawn tinged the sky, I made my move. Not north toward the hidden caves, but east, toward the very heart of the territory. Toward the old dens, the ones used by the pack's omegas and lowest members, tucked away in the less desirable, marshy ground. The places the Alpha and his sentinels never deigned to visit. I moved with a silence I had learned in my years as a lone wolf, a skill this pack had forgotten in its complacency. Kieran, bless him, slept deeply. The scent of the marshes, of mud and stagnant water and low-born wolf would help mask our own. I found what I was looking for by mid-morning, a small, dilapidated den, partly flooded, long abandoned. It was perfect. From here, I could hear the distant sounds of the main pack grounds. I could smell the smoke from their fires. I was a ghost in their home. For days, I lived like a shadow. I hunted small, swift prey that wouldn't be missed. I drank from the muddy streams. I learned the rhythms of the sentinel patrols from a distance, their patterns rigid and predictable. I watched the pack from the shadows of the deep woods, seeing their ordinary life continue as if my world hadn't ended. As if Kieran didn't exist. It was on the 5th night, as I was scouting closer to the training grounds, that I heard the first whispers. They came from 2 young she-wolves, gathering herbs at the tree line, their voices hushed and excited. Not natural, the way she just appeared. And the Alpha's scent was all over the pup. It's true, I caught it. He says she's lying, but my mother says the bond magic doesn't lie about a child. Francis won't talk about it, but he looks grim. He's been spending all his time in the archives. I heard a sentinel say they found where she'd been hiding near the Black Ridge, but she was gone. Like she vanished into air. So Jack had covered for me. He'd led them on a false trail. The knowledge was a tiny, warm coal in my chest. I was not entirely alone. The whispers were my weapon. The doubt was my army. Preston could issue all the decrees he wanted, but he could not control the story forever. Not when the evidence had cried in his own clearing. I was biding my time, growing stronger, learning their routines. My plan was a slow, patient poison. Until the night the wind shifted, carrying a familiar, agonized sound from the direction of the Alpha's lodge. It was Fiona, crying. Not gentle tears, but deep, wrenching sobs of utter despair. And beneath it, the low, furious cadence, a cold curiosity rooted me to the spot. This was not the sound of a happy new mate. This was the sound of a cage. I crept closer, using every skill I possessed, until the lodge was a dark shape against the moonlit sky. A window on the side was open, the sheer curtain fluttering. Fiona's voice, raw and broken, spilled out. "Weeks, Preston, weeks, and you won't even, the healers say there's nothing wrong, but the moon refuses to bless us. Don't you see? It's a judgment. She was my friend, and we betrayed her, and now the moon itself denies us a child." My breath caught in my throat. Preston's reply was a harsh growl. "Silence, it is stress. It is your own weakness. The bond will prove true in time." "What if it doesn't?" she wailed. "What if we are barren? What if the only heir you will ever have is the one you threw away? The one sleeping in the woods with the woman you ruined?" The slap was audible, sharp and final. Fiona's sobs cut off into a shocked, pained whimper. "Never speak of that bastard again," Preston snarled, his voice trembling with a rage I knew was fueled by fear. "I will find her. I will take the child, and I will end this. She will not haunt this pack any longer." The window slammed shut. I stood frozen in the shadows, the truth settling over me like a cloak of ice. Fiona was barren. The pure-blood union was yielding nothing but thorns. And Preston was coming for my son. The reckoning was no longer a choice. It was a race against time. The cliffhanger of my return had just snapped taut. He wasn't just going to hunt me. He was going to try to steal Kieran. And he would do it soon. Chapter 3. The Echo of Preston's Vow. I will find her. I will take my son and I will end her. Froze the very air in my lungs. It wasn't a threat born of rage anymore. It was a cold, administrative decree. My hiding time was over. This was now a hunt, and Kieran was the prize. In the damp gloom of the Omega den, my son slept against my chest, wrapped in a stolen woolen shawl. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his tiny back. I had to think to move, but a paralyzing clarity held me. Running would only make me easier to catch. Preston would expect me to run. Jack had already given him a trail to follow, north to the Black Ridge. I had to be where he would never think to look, deeper into the heart of his own domain. For 3 days, I became a ghost in the marsh. I moved only at twilight or under the thickest cover of night, slinking from one crumbling, abandoned den to another, each one a little closer to the pack's central clearing. I foraged for roots and trapped the occasional fish from the sluggish streams, my diet meager but sustaining. My milk was thin, but Kieran fed, his blue eyes watching the shadows on the ceiling with a solemnity that felt ancient. The dens here were a testament to neglect, a place where the unwanted were once sent to fade away. The air smelled of wet earth, decay, and sorrow. It was the perfect camouflage for a woman who had been erased. On the 4th evening, the wind shifted, carrying voices. I pressed myself into the hollow of a rotten log, Kieran silent against me. 2 young she-wolves from the hunting patrol passed by, their steps careful on the spongy. Said the scent went cold at the northern crags, one murmured, her voice tense. Jack's been up there for days with a full squad. Nothing, the other replied. A pause. I think the Alpha's rage is blinding him. Hush. Their footsteps faded, leaving me with a brittle spark of hope. The descent Jack had mentioned was not just a whisper, it was a conversation. And Preston's focus was miles away. But the memory of his vow was a knife at my throat. Taking Kieran wasn't just about an heir, it was about wiping me from the story completely. A barren Fiona, a reclaimed son, the perfect, unsullied Alpha bloodline. My existence was the only flaw in his new narrative. I needed a weapon, not a physical one. I was no match for Preston or his sentinels in a fight, but a weapon of truth. I needed to prove his lie to the entire pack, not just let them suspect it. And for that, I needed to get closer. The risk was astronomical, but the Omega dens had given me an idea. The forgotten ones who lived here were often ignored, their movements beneath notice. I had one advantage they did not. I knew the Alpha's routines, the layout of the lodge, the patterns of the guards. I had planned his harvest moon feast. I had arranged his security details with Jack. I knew this pack like I knew the scars on my own hands. Under the next moonless sky, I made my move. Kieran was fed and deeply asleep, nestled in a bed of dry moss in the deepest, most secure den I'd found, one with a single, camouflaged entrance. Leaving him was an agony that tore at my soul, a physical pain in my chest. I covered him with my scent-marked shawl and whispered a promise against his forehead. I will come back. I shifted. The change was quieter now, a practiced, suppressed ripple of muscle and bone. My wolf form was thinner than it should be, my coat lacking its former luster, but it was fast and silent. I became a shadow among shadows, a gray smudge flitting through the undergrowth. I skirted the main clearing, giving the great oak a wide berth. My destination was the storage cellar behind the communal kitchen. It was dug into a small hill, cool and dark, and was rarely locked. More importantly, it was where Francis, the historian, kept his older records. Parchments and ledgers not deemed important enough. The scent of cured meat and dried herbs filled my nostrils as I nudged the wooden door open with my nose. Inside, I shifted back to my human form, the cold earth biting at my bare feet. I felt exposed, vulnerable without Kieran's weight against me. A single shaft of moonlight through a high vent provided the only illumination. I found Francis's crate tucked behind barrels of salt. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. There were genealogy scrolls, records of border disputes, accounts of past harvest moons. I unrolled them with frantic care, my eyes scanning for one specific thing. I found it. A heavy ledger, the pages marked with the names of every mated pair in Silverfang for 5 generations. My fingers traced down the most recent entries. There, in Francis's neat script, Preston, Alpha to Sophia, accepted under the full moon. Bond witnessed and sealed. My throat tightened. A few lines below, a new, darker ink, the script more aggressive. New bond. Preston, Alpha to Fiona of the direct bloodline. Witnessed on the official story set in ink. But it wasn't the ledger I needed. I kept searching, through loose sheets and personal journals Francis had collected. And then I found it. A folded piece of parchment, tucked between accounts of grain yields. It was a copy of the Moon Priestess's proclamation from the night of my mating ceremony. A flowery, formal document, but it contained the exact words she had spoken to the pack, the words that held the moon's blessing. And crucially, it was stamped with the priestess's personal seal, a crescent moon encircling a wolf's head, a mark of authority that even an Alpha could not forge or erase. This was it, the proof that my bond was real, legitimate, and moon-blessed. Preston could decree whatever he wanted, but he could not unmake the moon's own record. I folded the parchment carefully, my heart pounding with a fierce, vindictive joy. A sound outside froze me, the crunch of a footstep on gravel. I shoved the parchment into the waistband of my rough-spun trousers and replaced the ledger, closing the crate silently. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, barely breathing. The footsteps passed, a sentinel on his rounds. I waited until the sound faded completely before slipping out the door, back into my wolf's skin. The return journey was a blur of adrenaline. Every rustle was a sentinel, every shadow Preston himself. But I made it back to the marshy den, my pulse roaring in my ears. I shifted and scrambled inside, my hands reaching immediately for Kieran. He was awake. His eyes were open in the darkness, silent and watchful. He hadn't cried. He simply looked at me as I gathered him up, clutching him to my chest, breathing in his sweet, milky scent. I shook with delayed terror. "I'm here," I whispered into his fine hair. "Mama's here." The parchment felt like a brand against my skin. I had my proof. But what was my next move? Shouting the truth from the shadows would accomplish nothing. I needed a stage. I needed witnesses. The pack's doubt was a smoldering ember. I needed to fan it into a flame they could not ignore. An opportunity came 2 nights later. The pack was called to a minor gathering. A dispute over hunting grounds with a neighboring pack needed to be addressed. It was business, not ceremony, but it required the pack's presence. From my hiding place at the edge of the clearing, shrouded by thick hawthorn bushes, I watched them assemble. Preston stood on the dais by the great oak, Fiona a pale, silent figure beside him. She looked hollow, her eyes fixed on nothing. Jack stood at attention to the side, his face an unreadable mask. Preston's voice was full of bluster and threat, directed at the imagined slights from the neighboring pack. But the pack's attention was scattered. I saw the 2 she-wolves from the marsh exchange a look. Francis stood near the back, his usual joviality absent. This was my chance, not to confront, but to cede. As Preston dismissed the gathering, I moved. Keeping to the deepest shadows, I tracked the path Francis would take back to his dwelling. I waited until he was alone, humming a troubled, tuneless song. I stepped out from behind a broad elm, just enough for the moonlight to catch my face. He stopped dead, his song cutting off with a gasp. His eyes widened in disbelief and fear. Sophia, Moon's grace, child you're supposed to be. I am where I need to be, Francis, I said, my voice low but clear. I didn't step closer. I have a question for you, historian. Can an Alpha's decree erase the Moon's own seal? He blinked, confused. What? No, of course not. The Moon's blessing is eternal. A decree is just words. I reached into my tunic and drew out the folded parchment. I didn't hand it to him. I simply held it up, letting the moonlight glint on the wax seal. Then these are not just words. He recognized it. His breath hitched. The priestess's proclamation, you have it. The truth has a seal, Francis. The lie only has power. I met his eyes. When the time comes, will you remember your duty to the Pack's history, or only to its Alpha? I didn't wait for an answer. I faded back into the shadows, leaving him standing there, stunned, the weight of the unseen seal hanging in the air between us. For a week, a tense calm settled. I nursed Kieran, my ears straining for any change in the Pack's rhythms. The hunt for me in the north seemed to have been called off. Preston's frustration was becoming a palpable scent on the wind, even from a distance. Then the storm broke. It was midday, the sun high but weak. I was at a small stream, collecting water in a carved gourd, Kieran tied securely to my back with strips of cloth. The birdsong suddenly stopped. A howl pierced the silence. Not a hunting cry, but a summons of alarm and urgency. It was followed by another, and another, a ripple of sound converging from all directions toward the Alpha's. My blood ran cold. It was too coordinated for a border incursion. This was internal. I moved without thought, instinct driving me toward the commotion, using every scrap of cover. I climbed a rocky outcrop that gave a distant, obscured view of the lodge's front entrance. What I saw stole the breath. Jack stood on the lodge's steps, facing outward. Before him, in the open space, stood a ring of sentinels, his sentinels. But they were not facing outward to protect the lodge. They were facing inward, their spears held not at rest, but in a guarded stance. Surrounding them was a larger, confused crowd of Pack members, and in the no-man's land between the sentinels and the Pack stood Preston. He was in his human form, dressed in his Alpha furs, his face contorted with pure, unadulterated fury. He was shouting at Jack, but I was too far to hear the words. Fiona stood in the doorway behind Jack, her hand pressed to her mouth, her body trembling. Then Jack spoke. His voice, usually so calm and measured, carried across the distance, clear and firm. The hunt is a waste of Pack strength, Alpha. The northern ridges are empty. We have searched every cave. She is not there. Preston took a step forward, but the line of sentinels tightened. You overstep, sentinel, Preston roared, the title a curse. You take her side. I take no side but the Pack's, Jack replied, his posture rigid. And the Pack murmurs. It questions a hunt for a ghost, while our true borders grow thin. It questions the story of a bastard born months too early. It questions the moon's denial of a promised heir. His gaze swept the crowd, and I saw heads nod, saw the two she-wolves from the marsh stand a little taller. He was challenging him, not for me but for the Pack's sanity. He was using the doubt I had nurtured and giving it a voice. Preston looked unhinged. He pointed a shaking finger at Jack. You are relieved of your command. You are all relieved. Drop your weapons. Not a single sentinel moved. The silence was deafening. It was then that Preston's eyes, wild and searching, scanned the crowd. They passed over the rocks, over the trees, and for a terrifying second, I thought they locked onto my hiding place. A cruel, desperate understanding dawned on his face. He didn't look at Jack or the mutinous sentinels. He looked past them, into the forests and the marshes, and he smiled. A terrible, chilling You're here, he breathed, though only I, it seemed, could hear the shape of the words on the wind. His voice rose to a shout, raw and triumphant with newfound certainty. She's not in the north. she's here." He turned his back on Jack, on the standoff, addressing the whole pack, his finger stabbing toward the dense, swampy heart of the territory. "The bastard she-wolf never left. She's been poisoning your minds from within." My heart stopped. He wasn't guessing. The certainty in his voice was absolute. He knew about the Omega dens. The race was over. The hunt was here, and he was coming for me. Chapter 4. He knew where to find me. The words, bellowed from the clearing, seemed to slither through the trees and find me on my rocky outcrop. A cold, sharp certainty pierced my chest, sharper than any claw. Preston's voice held no guesswork, only a hunter's grim conclusion. The game of hide was over. The final hunt was called. I slid from the rock, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic counter-rhythm to Kieran's peaceful breathing in the sling against my chest. The mutiny at the Alpha's lodge was a gift of time, but a fleeting one. Jack's rebellion would hold Preston only for minutes. I had to move. My feet, bare and calloused from the forest floor, carried me not deeper into the wilds, but back toward the heart of the territory. Back to the marshy, forgotten Omega dens. It was the last place a sane wolf would run, which was precisely why I had to go there first. I had to retrieve my few supplies, the herbs, the stolen water skin. And I had to think. The dens were as I left them, damp and silent except for the buzz of insects. I placed Kieran on my worn cloak in the driest corner, his little face serene in sleep. The moon priestess's proclamation, its seal a cool weight in my palm, felt like my only weapon. Francis had seen it. He knew. But would his duty to history outweigh his fear of his Alpha? I couldn't rely on it. A new sound cut through the marsh's hum. Not the howl of a hunter, but the swift, sure tread of a single wolf approaching on 2 feet. I spun, my body curving instinctively between the sound and my son. The ragged hide, covering the den entrance, was pushed aside. Jack stood there, his frame filling the low opening. He wasn't in sentinel formation, but his posture was rigid, his eyes scanning the dim interior before locking on me. He carried the scent of tension and defiance. "He's mobilizing the hunters himself," Jack said, his voice low and urgent. "The sentinels won't obey, but the hunters, they're loyal to the title, if not the man. He's convinced them you're a threat to the And you," I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Why are you here, to give me a head start?" "No." His gaze flicked to Kieran, then back to me. "To ask you what you intend to do. He's coming here, Sophia. He told the pack he'd find you in the filth where you belong." He meant the Omega grounds. "He'll be here within the hour." The cold certainty returned. So that was it. In his mind, I was so low, so discarded, that I could only crawl back to the most wretched place. His arrogance was a map. "Then I won't be here," I said, bending to gather Kieran. "But I'm not running for the border, Jack." "What else is there?" he demanded, a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "You have the proof. Take it and go. Find another pack, a human town. And let him win." The words were a snarl. "Let him tell the pack I fled in shame, a bastard-bearing coward. Let him paint my son as a stain forever. No, the truth dies if I leave. It becomes a rumor, a story for historians like Francis to whisper. It needs a witness." Jack stepped fully inside, the space shrinking around us. "You can't witness anything if you're dead." "I didn't come back to die," I said, meeting his stare. "I came back to end him, but I can't do it from the shadows. The pack has to see, they have to choose." He was silent for a long moment, listening to the distant, gathering sounds of the hunt. "They're afraid. Of him, of change. Showing them a scroll won't be enough." "I know." An idea, desperate and forming, began to crystallize. "He's coming to the Omega dens. Let him come. Let him search the filth. And while he's proving to everyone how low he believes his true mate and heir belong." I saw the understanding dawn in Jack's eyes, followed by stark disbelief. You want to go to the Alpha's lodge. Now, while he's away. Where else would the true Alpha heir be presented? I hefted Kieran, who stirred with a soft sigh. The heart of the pack. The home he threw me out of. You said the sentinels are yours. Will they stand aside? He ran a hand over his face. They'll stand aside for you. They've seen his madness. But Fiona is there. Fiona, the name was a shard of old pain, now dulled by a colder purpose. Good, I said. She should be there. She's part of this. Jack studied me as if seeing a stranger. The soft, rejected she-wolf he'd warned was gone. It's suicide. He'll rage. He'll kill you on the spot. Not if the pack is watching, I whispered. Not if I stand in the one place he can't violate without revealing the monster he is, the sacred space of the Alpha's hearth. A howl, sharp and commanding, echoed in the middle distance. Preston. He was close. There's no time, Jack hissed. Come. He didn't lead me out the way he came. Instead, he moved to the back of the den, where the wall was a tangle of roots and soft, rotten wood. With a few strong pulls, he widened a gap I had never noticed, revealing a narrow, animal-run tunnel. Old escape route from a more paranoid time, he muttered. It comes out near the western berry thickets. Go, circle wide to the lodge. I didn't thank him. Gratitude was too fragile for this. I simply nodded, clutched Kieran to me, and crawled into the damp, earth-smelling darkness. The tunnel was short, and I emerged into a thicket of brambles, the lodge visible through the trees on its raised mound. The sounds of the hunt were concentrated behind me, near the marsh. I moved like a ghost, using every dip and shadow, my son a silent, sleeping weight. The two sentinels at the base of the lodge steps saw me approach. Their eyes widened, but they did not reach for weapons. One gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod and stepped aside. Jack had been true to his word. The main door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The great room was dim, the fire low. It smelled of pine, wealth, and a deep, sour unhappiness. I stood just inside, my feet on the polished wood floor he had forbidden me from dirtying. Who's there? Fiona's voice came from the hallway, thin and wary. She emerged from the direction of the bedchamber, wrapped in a shawl. She looked gaunt, her eyes hollow. When she saw me, she froze, one hand flying to her mouth. No scream came out, just a choked gasp. "Hello, Fiona," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet space. You can't be here," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting Preston to materialize. "He's hunting you," he said. I know what he said. He's searching the Omega dens for his filth. I took a step forward, and she flinched. "He won't find it there." Her gaze fell to Kieran, and a terrible, raw longing twisted her features. The barrenness Jack had spoken of was etched in every line of her. "What do you want?" Her voice was a broken thing. "What was always mine," I said, moving to the massive stone hearth. The central fire of the pack. I knelt, ignoring her, and laid Kieran gently on the thick wolf pelt rug before it. He stretched, his tiny fists curling. "I am here to present the Alpha heir to the sacred hearth, as is our way." "He rejected him," she cried, finding a shred of strength. "Before the whole pack, he is a bastard." From my pocket, I drew the moon priestess's proclamation. I didn't open it. I simply placed it on the stones of the hearth, the unbroken seal facing outward. The moon does not lie. The law does not care for a father's rejection. The heir is born of the true mate. He belongs here. The reality of what I was doing seemed to crash over her. I wasn't just hiding. I was claiming. I was performing the rite Preston had denied us. "He'll kill you for this," she breathed, but there was no conviction in it, only a horrified fascination. "Perhaps," I agreed, rising. I turned to face her fully. "But you will have watched. You, his political mate, the sister who took everything. You will have seen his true heir presented at the hearth you cannot give him an heir for. How does the moon bless your union now, Fiona?" It was cruel. I let it be. Her face crumpled, not in anger, but in a wave of profound, silent grief. She didn't answer. Distant shouts were getting louder. The hunt was turning back, unsatisfied. They would be coming here. Preston would be coming here. I walked to the large window that overlooked the clearing. Below, pack members were milling, confused by the returned hunters. I saw Francis among them, his head tilted up toward the lodge, his expression anxious. Taking a deep breath, the sound cut through the murmurs below. Dozens of faces turned upward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw recognition, then shock. I stood in the frame, visible to all. "People of Silverfang!" My voice, powered by a strength I didn't know I had, carried over the clearing. "You hunt for a phantom in the marshes. Look to your Alpha's hearth." I stepped aside from the window, leaving it open. Let them see. Let them wonder. Chaos erupted below. Questions, shouts. Then a roar of pure, undiluted. Preston stood at the tree line, his hunters behind him. His face was a mask of rage as he saw the open window, saw the pack's attention fixed on the lodge. He had come from the Omega dens, empty-handed, to find his prey not fleeing, but ensconced in the very center of his power. His eyes met mine across the distance. The bond was dead, but I felt the blast of his hatred like a physical force. He shifted. Not the controlled, ceremonial change, but a violent, explosive transformation into his massive silver wolf. The pack scattered before him as he surged up the mound toward the lodge steps. The two sentinels there braced, but a snarled command from Jack, who appeared from the side, made them hold their position. They did not block him. They let the Alpha pass. The door burst inward, splintering off its hinges. Preston stood in the wreckage, back in human form, chest heaving. His eyes burned with a feral light. They swept past Fiona, who had shrunk against the wall, and fixed on me, standing between him and the hearth, between him and his son. "You," he snarled, the word thick with venom. "Me," I said, my voice quiet in the shattered room. His gaze darted to Kieran on the pelt, to the sealed scroll on the hearthstone. Understanding, and with it, a towering, apocalyptic fury dawned. "You dare," he breathed, taking a step forward. "You dare bring your bastard into my home and perform this farce?" "It is no farce," I said. "It is law, it is truth. You can read it for yourself." I gestured to the proclamation. He didn't even look at it. His focus was entirely on me, a predator zeroing in for the kill. "The only truth is that you are a disease, and I will cut you out of this pack forever." He took another step. The air crackled with his intent. Behind him, in the doorway, I saw Jack's silhouette, and behind him, the fearful faces of pack members crowding to see. This was the moment. He would kill me now in front of them all. My proof would die with me. I raised my chin. "Then do it, Alpha. Kill your true mate. Kill the mother of your heir, at your own sacred hearth. Let the pack see what their leader truly is." He lunged, but it wasn't at me. In a blur of motion, he swept past me, his hand closing not around my throat, but around the moon priestess's scroll. He snatched it from the hearthstone and, in the same motion, hurled it into the low-burning fire. "No!" The cry tore from me, from Fiona, from Francis in the doorway. The ancient parchment blackened, curled, the red seal melting into the flames. The physical proof, the irrefutable truth, became. Preston turned back to me, a savage, triumphant gleam in his eyes. "No proof, no heir, only a dead traitor." He had won. He had destroyed it. The hope in my chest turned to cinder. But then, from the doorway, a new voice rang out, trembling with outrage. I saw it. All eyes turned. Francis, the historian, pushed his way to the front, his face pale but his eyes blazing. He pointed a shaking finger at the fire, then at Preston. "I witnessed the document. I saw the seal of the moon priestess. The mating was legitimate. The child is trueborn. You can burn the paper, Alpha, but you cannot burn the truth from my eyes. A stunned silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire consuming the last of the scroll. Preston stared at Francis, his triumph morphing into something uglier, more dangerous. "You," he whispered. "Historian. You side with this filth?" "I side with the recorded truth," Francis insisted, his courage feeding on his own words. "The pack has a right to know." Murmurs rose from the crowd behind him. Preston looked from Francis's defiant face, to my still form, to the ash and the fire, to the pack members whose loyalty was now splintering before him. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate need to regain control. His gaze landed on Fiona, cowering by the wall, an object of blame, a tool. His voice, when he spoke again, was different. Cold, commanding, dripping with a new, "There is your truth," he declared, his voice carrying out the door to the pack. "A conspiracy, not just a rejected whore, but a plot against your Alpha." He pointed at Fiona. "My own mate, barren, jealous. She must have conspired with the historian to forge this proof. She let this viper into our home tonight." Fiona's eyes went wide with horrified disbelief. "Preston, silence!" he roared, and the force of his Alpha command slammed into her, making her whimper. He turned his terrifying focus back to the pack. "They seek to undermine me with lies, to place a bastard in my stead. This is not just an insult. This is treason." He looked directly at Jack, who stood rigid in the doorway. "Head Sentinel, you have failed to root out this corruption in our midst, but I will not. The traitors are now known. Seize the historian. Seize my disloyal mate." He finally turned his burning eyes back to me, a final, terrible smile touching his lips. "And as for this one, she has committed the ultimate sacrilege. She has defiled the Alpha's hearth with her bastard spawn. For that, there is only one punishment prescribed by our oldest laws." He paused, letting the ancient, grim weight of his words settle over the silent pack. "A challenge to the death. Not by me. That would be too merciful." He raised his voice to a shout that shook the lodge. "I call for the right of the claimed hearth. Let her be fought, and let her blood be spilled upon the stones she has polluted, by the one whose place she sought to steal." His fingers swung, not to a warrior, but to the trembling, broken figure against the wall. "Fiona, you will fight her, you will kill her, or you will both burn." Chapter 5. The words hung in the air, colder than the deepest winter frost. The right of the claimed hearth. I knew the law, the old, brutal law, a challenge of purity of possession. To defend the sanctity of the Alpha's home, the accused mate must destroy the defiler, or be destroyed herself. Preston wasn't just punishing me. He was offering Fiona as a sacrifice to save his crumbling throne. A profound silence swallowed the clearing. Then a collective, sharp intake of breath from the pack. Fiona's face, already pale, went ashen. "The law is clear," Preston boomed, his voice stripped of all pretense of affection for her. He was a cornered wolf, teeth bared at anything that moved. "My mate's loyalty is in question. Her ability to guard our hearth is compromised. She will cleanse it with the intruder's blood, or her own will soak the stones. The moon will judge her truth." He was brilliant in the most monstrous way. He'd turned a crisis of his own making into a spectacle that would either kill me, kill Fiona, or both. If Fiona won, he'd be rid of me and could paint her as a righteous, if tragic, heroine. If I won, I'd be a mate killer, and he could execute me for that. And if we both perished, a tidy solution to all his problems. Jack's sentinels, still forming their protective circle, shifted uneasily. This was beyond a mutiny over orders. This was sacred pack law, twisted. To interfere now would be to spit on every tradition. I saw the conflict in the tight line of Jack's jaw. He had given me a path to run, but I had chosen to stand here. This was my battlefield now. Francis looked stricken, his historical triumph turning to ash. He had borne witness to the truth, and it had led to a death sentence. My arms tightened around Kieran, who was fussing softly, sensing the storm of aggression in the air. I had brought him to this hearth, to this moment. I had to finish it. Preston's eyes, burning with volatile fury, locked onto mine. "Prepare the circle. At Moon High, the rite begins." He turned, grabbing Fiona's arm with a grip that made her whimper, and hauled her into the lodge, slamming the door shut on the stunned pack. The spell broke. Murmurs erupted, frantic and fearful. Jack immediately began barking orders, not to his sentinels, but to the pack at large. "Clear the space, from the lodge porch to the great oak. No one crosses the boundary once the moon marks the zenith." Now, the pack scattered to obey, the momentum of ritual taking over. I stood frozen by the hearth, the cold stone at my back. I couldn't run, not anymore. The rite bound me as surely as it bound Fiona. A presence approached my side. Jack, his voice low and urgent. "This was not the play, Sophia. It was the only play left," I whispered, my gaze fixed on the closed door. "He was going to hunt me like a rabbit until the end of my days. Now he has to watch. He's forcing her to kill you. Or me to kill her," I said, the words tasting like poison. "He wins either way, unless..." "Unless what?" I finally looked at him. "Unless the moon denies him a victor." Jack studied my face, his keen eyes missing nothing. "What do you need?" "Kieran," I said, the name a prayer. "When it begins, he cannot be here. He cannot see this. He cannot be anywhere Preston can snatch him." Jack gave a single, sharp nod. "Francis." He gestured, and the old historian hurried over, his jovial face sagging with distress. "Child, this is a catastrophe. I spoke the truth, and he has made it a weapon." "The truth is still a weapon, Francis," I said. "I need you to wield it one more time. Take Kieran. Take him to the old Omega den, to the tunnel. Stay with him. If the howls you hear are not mine, you run. You take him, and you run as far as you can. Jack will give you direction." Francis's eyes filled with tears, but he straightened his shoulders, the historian's duty settling upon him like a cloak. "The heir's safety, the preservation of the true line. Yes, I understand." Gently, with a heart cracking in my chest, I transferred my sleeping son into Francis's careful arms. I kissed Kieran's downy forehead, breathing in his scent, mine and Preston's, as Francis disappeared into the dispersing crowd, cradling my world against his chest. A hollow certainty filled me. This was it. The final gamble. The pack worked with a grim efficiency, forming a wide, bare circle of trampled earth between the lodge and the ancient oak. Torches were lit, casting a flickering, savage light. The moon, a cold, watchful the lodge door opened. Fiona emerged first, changed into a simple, dark tunic and leggings. Her face was washed clean, her hair braided tightly back. She looked like a ghost of the vibrant she-wolf I'd once called friend. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her expression hollow. Preston followed, having shed his ceremonial vest. He stood on the porch, a king. "The hearth is claimed," he announced, his voice carrying in the still night. "The defiler stands within its circle. The defender must answer. Let the rite commence." Fiona stepped down into the circle. The pack, lining the edges, was utterly silent. I walked forward from the hearth to meet her, stopping a dozen paces away. We were alone in the torchlight. Her eyes met mine. I saw no hatred there, only a bottomless well of shame and a terrifying resignation. "I didn't want this, Sophia," she whispered, the words meant for me alone. "You agreed to be his mate," I said, my voice low and steady. "You stood beside him when he cast me out. Your want stopped mattering the moment you took my place at his side." A flinch, a truth she knew. "He is my Alpha, my brother. And he is sacrificing you to save his pride. Look at him, Fiona. Does he look like a man who loves you? or a man using the last tool in his box. Her gaze flickered to the porch, to Preston's implacable, furious figure. A tremor went through her. "The right demands a fight," I said, circling slowly. "It doesn't demand that we give him the show he wants." Her eyes snapped back to me, confusion warring with despair. What choice do we have? We have all the choices he thinks he's taken from us. With a snarl that was more anguish than aggression, she lunged. It was clumsy, telegraphed. I sidestepped easily, feeling the rush of air as her hand swiped past my face. The pack murmured. We clashed, a tangle of limbs that looked more violent than it was. I grabbed her arm, she grabbed my shoulder, and we spun, off balance. I could feel the weakness in her, not just of body, but of spirit. She was barren, betrayed, and now forced to fight for a man who had just slapped her and sentenced her to this. "He told them you conspired with me," I hissed as we grappled, my mouth close to her ear. "Because you are barren, he blamed you, your failure, not his." A sob hitched in her throat. She shoved me away and I let her, stumbling back. "He needs an heir, Fiona, the pure bloodline," I goaded, circling again. "My son is his. The moon priestess confirmed it, and he rejected him. He would rather see his line end with you than acknowledge the child he got on me." "Stop it," she screamed, the sound raw and broken. She charged again, this time with more force, driven by pain rather than duty. We went down in a cloud of dust, rolling. Her fist connected with my jaw, a bright spark of pain. I retaliated, not with claws, but with a hard shove that broke her hold and sent her sprawling. I stood, breathing heavily. She pushed herself up onto her knees, her shoulders shaking. "Get up," Preston roared from the porch. "Fight, you pathetic creature, defend your hearth." The sound of his voice, so full of contempt for her, did what my words could not. Something in Fiona's eyes shifted. The resignation burned away, replaced by a slow-dawning, furious clarity. She looked from Preston's livid face to mine, to the pack watching in horror. She climbed to her feet, but she didn't come at me. She turned to face her mate, her brother, her Alpha. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but in the silent circle it was a thunderclap. Preston stiffened. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice grew stronger, ringing out. "I will not kill for you, not for a hearth that has never been mine, not for a mate who sees me as a failed broodmare and a convenient scapegoat. The moon denies us a child, Preston. She denied you. She judges you." The air left the clearing. No one breathed. Preston's face contorted with pure, undiluted rage. "You defy the right. You defy your Alpha." "I defy a tyrant," Fiona shouted, her own rage finally breaking free. "The heir is out there, your true heir, and you would have me murder his mother to hide your shame. The law says I must defend the hearth from a defiler. She is no defiler. She is the mother of your child, whom you wronged. The defiler is you. You defiled our bond. You defiled our pack's laws with your lies." It was a magnificent, suicidal rebellion. Preston moved, not with an order but with a predator's lethal speed. He leaped from the porch, shifting in midair. A massive, silver-furred wolf landed in the circle, lips peeled back from teeth like daggers. He was going to kill her himself, but Jack, a gray blur, intercepted, colliding with the alpha wolf in a crash of muscle and snarls. Jack, in his wolf form, stood between Preston and Fiona, his own teeth bared, a deep, warning growl vibrating the earth. He didn't attack, but he held the line. The circle dissolved into chaos. Sentinels and hunters alike surged forward, some shifting, others crying out in alarm. In the confusion, I saw my chance. This was the denial. This was the moon withholding a victor. But Preston would recover. He would kill Fiona, he would turn on Jack, and then he would come for me and Kieran with nothing left to lose. I had one move left, the most dangerous one. As the two massive wolves faced off, and the pack descended into pandemonium, I turned and ran. Not away from the lodge, but toward it. I slipped through the chaotic scrum of bodies, unseen in the frenzy, and darted up the porch steps and through the open door into the Alpha's lodge. Inside, it was still and dark, the only light from the dying embers in the very hearth that had sparked the war. I moved with a purpose I didn't know I possessed. I went to the far wall, to the great, carved timber that bore the etched history of the Silverfang Alphas. Preston's symbol, a jagged crown, was freshly cut beside our father's. My fingers traced the wood. Then I found what I was looking for. A slight irregularity, a knot in the grain my father had once shown me, a secret kept from a daughter who would never be Alpha. I pressed it hard, in a specific sequence. With a soft, gritty sigh, a section of the wall beside the hearth pivoted inward, revealing a dark space. The Alpha's vault, not for treasure but for truth. The oldest proclamations, the blood oaths, the records too sensitive for the historian's hall. I stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of old parchment and stone. By the faint light from the room, I saw the shelves, and on a small, central pedestal it lay. The Alpha's talisman, a heavy crescent moon pendant forged from meteoric iron, inlaid with a single milky moonstone. It was ancient, passed from Alpha to recognized heir. It was not a weapon of war, but of authority. To hold it was to hold the pack's spiritual anchor. My father had never gotten the chance to formally bestow it. Preston had simply taken. Outside, the snarls and shouts reached a fever pitch. I heard Preston's enraged howl, the sound of a wolf being overpowered. Jack was holding him, but not for long. My hand closed around the talisman. It was cold, then warm, as if reacting to the touch of a bloodline heir's mother. My son's birthright. A shadow filled the secret doorway. I whirled, my heart. It was Preston. In human form again, his clothes torn, a bloody gash on his forehead. His eyes, wild and insane, landed on the talisman in my hand. The rage on his face morphed into something beyond rage, a primal, superstitious horror. You thieving whore, he breathed. It doesn't belong to you, I said, my voice echoing strangely in the small stone room. You took it, just like you took everything else, but you can't take this. The moon denies you. He took a step into the vault, blocking the only exit. Give it to me, now, and I'll make your death quick. I clutched the heavy pendant to my chest. You declared my son a bastard with no claim, but this knows his claim. Doesn't it, Preston? That's why you're afraid. It's not just a symbol, it's a judge. His control snapped. With a roar, he lunged for me. I had nowhere to go. The stone walls pressed in. I raised the talisman, not as a weapon, but as a shield. As his hands closed around my wrists, crushing, forcing the metal into my flesh, a blinding, silvery light erupted from the moonstone. It filled the vault, cold and pure as moonlight on snow. Preston screamed, a sound of sheer agony, and recoiled as if burned. He stumbled back out into the lodge, clutching his hands, which were smoke. The light from the talisman faded, leaving me trembling, the pendant now glowing with a soft, internal radiance. I stared at it, then at Preston, who was cradling his seared palms, his eyes wide with terror and disbelief. The sounds of battle outside had stopped. A new silence gathered. Preston looked from his ruined hands to the talisman, to my face. The last vestige of his certainty crumbled, replaced by the raw fear of a man who has just seen his gods reject him. He whispered the words that sealed his doom, the revelation that shattered everything. It was never supposed to be you, he choked out, his gaze fixed on the glowing pendant. The moon's choice, the night of the mating ceremony, it was never you. The world tilted. The cliffhanger wasn't the fight or the escape. It was this, a truth buried deeper than any vault. The talisman's light pulsed in my hand, as if in agreement. Chapter 6. The words hung in the vault's cold air, more damaging than any blow. I was never the moon's choice. Preston cradled his scorched hands, his face a mask of agony and furious revelation. The talisman in my grip hummed, a warm, steady pulse against the icy shock of his confession. All the ceremonies, all the whispered blessings, the entire foundation of our union, a lie. My knees threatened to buckle. I tightened my hold on the talisman, its light now a soft, contained glow. "What did you do?" My voice was a scrape of sound. From the main lodge, the sounds of the fray, snarls, shouts, the crash of furniture, filtered in, a distant storm. Here, in this hidden space, there was only this truth, rotting the past from the inside out. Preston's eyes, wide with pain and a desperate need to wound me back, locked on mine. The moon priestess that night, she was old, dying, her sight was clouded. He sucked in a breath, his blistered fingers twitching. When she took my hand and yours, she hesitated. She looked confused. She said the threads were tangled, that the moon's will was unclear. I remembered her milky eyes, her long silence. I had thought it solemnity. "You lied to the pack. You declared the bond clear." He spat, pushing himself up against the stone wall. A weak, confused choosing would have fractured the pack before I'd even taken my father's place. I saw the doubt in the elder's eyes, so I proclaimed the bond true. I gave them a strong story. His gaze raked over me, now full of contempt. "You were suitable from a good line." The enormity of it stole my breath. My entire life, my identity as his chosen, the respect I'd garnered, the future I'd believed in, all of it was a political prop, a convenient fiction he had authored. The humiliation of my rejection was now 1,000 times deeper. I hadn't just lost a mate, I had never truly had one to begin with. "And Fiona?" I asked, the pieces clicking into a horrifying new picture. A grotesque smile touched his lips. A pureblood union was always the stronger story. Once my position was secure, I could correct the narrative. The moon denied me a child with you, proving the initial choice was flawed. Mating with my sister would purify the line. It was a better story, a stronger one. He believed his own words. He saw lives as plot points, truths as malleable tools. My free hand went to my stomach where Kieran had grown. "My son, our son, he is real. He is not a story." "He is a complication," Preston roared, then flinched, his anger overwhelming his pain for a second. "A bastard born of a false choosing. The talisman." He stared at the object in my hand with a mixture of terror and longing. "It shouldn't burn me. It should only burn those with no claim. Unless its magic is as confused as that old priest." But it hadn't burned me. It had warmed to me. And Kieran, I had held him before it. The talisman's light had flared, not in rejection, but in recognition. A profound certainty settled in my core, cutting through the devastation of his confession. The moon's will might have been unclear that night, but it was clear now. It had spoken through my son. It had spoken through this ancient stone that now felt like an extension of my own heartbeat. The clamor from the lodge was shifting. The sounds of combat were dying down, replaced by raised, arguing voices. Jack's voice, commanding, cut through the din. They would be coming. Preston heard it too. His survival instincts, ever sharp, overrode his panic. "Give it to me," he demanded, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. "Give me the talisman and flee. I will let you go. You can disappear with your pup. This ends now." He was lying. I could smell the deceit on him, sour and sharp. If I handed over the proof of his illegitimacy, my and Kieran's lives were worth less than nothing. We would be hunted to the ends of the earth. "No," I said, simple and final. I turned my back on him, the ultimate defiance for a wolf, and strode from the vault. He let out a choked sound of rage but could not follow. The talisman's protective aura, or perhaps the threat of its burn, held him at bay. The main lodge was a scene of suspended chaos. Jack, in human form now with a bleeding gash on his temple, stood between two factions. His sentinels, a solid, bruised line at his back, faced off against Preston's hunters. Between them, the rest of the pack milled, a sea of confused and frightened faces. Fiona stood near the shattered hearth, held upright by Francis, her face pale but her chin. Preston's slap had left a livid mark on her cheek. All eyes swung to me as I emerged from the Alpha's chambers. The talisman in my hand was no longer blazing, but its inherent, subtle glow was unmistakable in the dim light. "The Alpha's talisman," someone gasped. "She stole it," a hunter shouted. "It shines for her," another voice, one of the young she-wolves, whispered in. Jack's shoulders slumped slightly in relief at the sight of me. Fiona's eyes went wide. Francis adjusted his spectacles, his historian's mind already recording the moment. Then Preston staggered out behind me. His blistered, red hands were held up for all to see. "She is a thief and a witch," he bellowed, his Alpha command ringing out, but it was frayed, desperate. "She has defiled our most sacred relic with her bastards." The hunters stirred, but Jack took a step forward. "It does not explain the burn on your hands, Preston." He used the name, not the title. The silence that followed was absolute. "The talisman only burns those who have no true claim to the Alpha's line. That is the oldest law, older than any of us." Preston's face contorted. He was cornered, and a cornered wolf is at its most dangerous. His eyes darted to Fiona, and I saw the new lie crystallize in his gaze. The scapegoat. But Fiona spoke first. Her voice, though weak, carried. "He confessed to her in there." She pointed a trembling finger toward the vault. "I heard it. The night of their choosing, the moon priestess was uncertain. The moon's will was unclear. He lied to all of us to secure his power." A collective shockwave passed through the pack. Murmurs of disbelief and betrayal rose like a swarm of bees. "She lies," Preston thundered. "The barren she-wolf, jealous of the true heir, conspires with the outcast. This is their treachery. There is a way to know the truth." The voice was mine. It sounded calmer than I felt. I held the talisman aloft. "The moon's will was unclear then. Let it be clear now." I looked past Preston to the crowded lodge. "Bring me my son." For a moment, no one moved. Then, an elderly she-wolf from the back, one who had helped in the Omega dens long ago, nodded and slipped out. The tension in the room was a physical weight. Preston looked like he wanted to rip the talisman from my hands with his teeth, but the memory of the burn kept him rooted. Minutes stretched. Then the she-wolf returned, cradling a sleepy, swaddled Kieran. She brought him to me, her eyes soft with apology and something like hope. I took my son, my heart hammering against his small body. I had not held him since before the confrontation, and the solid, warm reality of him grounded. I turned to face the pack, to face Preston. "The talisman tests the blood's claim," I said, echoing Jack's words. "You say my son is a bastard with no claim. You say your claim is pure and true." I looked directly at Preston. Let the stone decide. Before he could protest, I knelt, placing the talisman on the stone floor before the broken hearth. Then, with a deep breath, I gently laid Kieran beside it, his tiny hand brushing against the cool, glowing surface. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. 2. Then, the talisman. It was not the violent, burning light that had repelled Preston. This was a radiant, gentle, silvery glow that pulsed in time with Kieran's quiet breaths. It washed over his small form, embracing him, and the light seemed to gather around his little fist where it touched the stone. A soft, musical hum filled the lodge, a sound of rightness, of recognition. A gasp went through the pack. Many knelt, instinctively bowing before the ancient magic's clear verdict. Preston stared, his face bleaching of all color. "No," he whispered. "The moon's will is clear now," I said, lifting my son back into my arms. The light from the talisman clung to him for a moment before gently fading back into the stone. My son is of the true Alpha line. Your claim, I looked at his ruined hands. Your claim is ash. The truth, given physical form by the pack's most sacred object, was undeniable. The last vestiges of Preston's authority dissolved. The hunters at his back lowered their eyes, stepping away from him. He stood alone in the center of the lodge, a man stripped of every story he had ever told. Jack moved then. Preston of the Silverfang, his voice was formal, heavy with finality. You have lied to the pack, defiled our traditions, and betrayed the moon's true will. Your claim is forfeit. By the old laws, you are outcast. You will be taken to the border and cast out. If you return, you will be killed. Preston said nothing. He just stared at his burned hands, then at Kieran in my arms, his expression empty of everything but a hollow, stunned defeat. He offered no resistance as two of Jack's sentinels took him by the arms and led him, silent and broken, from the lodge. The silence he left behind was profound. Then, slowly, every face turned to me, and to my son. I felt the weight of their gaze, the expectation, the hope, the fear. I was the rejected mate, the outcast who had returned. I held the heir and I held the talisman, but I was not an alpha. Jack approached, bowing his head first to Kieran, then to me. The pack needs leadership, he said quietly, for my ears only. The heir is an infant. A regent must be named to hold the pack until he comes of age. I looked out at them, at Francis, who gave me a firm nod, at the young wolves who had first whispered their doubts, at the elders who had turned their backs on me under Preston's decree, at Fiona, who met my gaze with a sorrow too deep for words. This was my pack. It had hurt me, exiled me, and nearly destroyed me. But it was also the home of my son's legacy. His future was here in these woods under this moon. Fleeing was no longer an option. We had won. Now we had to build. The pack needs truth, I said, my voice carrying. It needs to heal. I looked at Jack, the loyal soldier who had risked everything for what was right. The head sentinel has held the pack's safety in his hands. I raised my voice. A murmur of surprise, then of approval, rippled through the crowd. Jack looked stunned, then his expression settled into one of fierce determination. He knelt before Kieran. I will serve the true heir. I will protect this pack, on my life. One by one, the pack followed suit, kneeling not to me, but to the child in my arms, to the future he represented. The circle was complete. The outcast was not Alpha, but she was home. As the pack began to disperse, to tend to wounds and process the night's upheaval, Fiona approached. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes red-rimmed. I am sorry, Sophia, she said, the words barely audible. For everything. I have no right to ask for anything, but I will leave if you wish it. I will go far from here. I looked at her, my once friend, my betrayer, the sister who had been as much a pawn in Preston's stories as I had. Her pain was real. Her punishment, a life shackled to a tyrant's lie, had already been severe. The pack needs to heal, I repeated. Running from what's broken doesn't fix it. Stay, help fix it. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a chance for both of us and for the pack we both, in our own ways, loved. She nodded, tears finally spilling over, and turned away. Later, in a quiet chamber near the old Omega dens that had been hastily prepared for us, I sat with Kieran. The talisman rested on a simple shelf nearby, its light a comforting, silent vigil. The sounds of the pack were different now, subdued, thoughtful, but without the undercurrent of dread that had. Jack found me there as the first hint of dawn grayed the sky. He is gone, he said. Cast beyond the borders, the sentinels will patrol. He won't return. Thank you, Jack, for everything. You gave me back my honor, he said simply, and you gave the pack its future. He looked at the sleeping Kieran. He will be a good alpha. He will have a true story. I smiled, a real one, weary but unburdened. Yes, He will. Alone again, I held my son close, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The past was a wound, but it was not a chain. Preston's lie had shattered one life, but in its place, something true had been born. Not just Kieran, but a new beginning for all of us. I was Sophia, rejected mate, outcast mother. I was not the moon's choice for a false alpha. I was the mother of the true heir. And that was the only story that mattered now. We were home.